The Montana sky was a canvas of bruised purple and molten gold, stretching vast and unyielding over the endless plains as the stagecoach lurched into Hollow Creek, 1885. Dust rose in restless swirls, clinging to my gray calico dress like a memory I couldn't shake. I, Eleanor Mayfield, stepped onto the parched earth, my boots sinking slightly, my satchel gripped tight, as if it could anchor me to the life I'd left behind. No longer the Chicago schoolteacher tarnished by a broken engagement, I was now Mrs. Caleb Harrow, a name as foreign as the sharp tang of sagebrush carried on the evening wind. My heart thrummed with a question that burned brighter than the setting sun. What kind of man sends for a stranger to share his life? And what shadows does he hide? Hollow Creek was less a town than a stubborn foothold against the wild, a scattering of weathered saloons, a mercantile with a sagging porch, and a livery stable creaking under the weight of time. The sun dipped low, painting the dirt road in fiery hues, casting long shadows that danced like specters of a sunset frontier tale. I adjusted my bonnet, its blue ribbon fluttering against my cheek, and smoothed the silver brooch pinned to my bodice, a keepsake from my mother, its cool metal a reminder of her whispered words. "Find your strength, Eleanor." The street was empty, save for the distant bark of a dog and the groan of a saloon sign swaying in the breeze. Had Caleb Harrow changed his mind? His letter, tucked in my pocket, had been brief, steady handwriting promising a farm, a partnership, but nothing of the man himself. I'd fled Chicago's whispers, the sting of a fiancé who'd chosen an heiress over me, but standing here, I wondered if I'd traded one cage for another. A soft thunder of hooves broke the silence, pulling my gaze to the horizon. A lone rider approached, his silhouette tall and unyielding against the fading light. Caleb Harrow dismounted with a cowboy's grace, his boots stirring clouds of dust that shimmered in the twilight. He was older than I'd imagined, late 30s, his face carved by sun and sorrow, with dark blonde hair streaked with gray and hazel eyes that held a storm beneath their calm. His faded brown shirt was rolled at the sleeves, revealing forearms hardened by labor, and a black Stetson shaded his brow. No smile, no warmth, just a nod, as if I were a parcel delivered late. "Eleanor?" His voice was low, like gravel, underfoot, cautious but not unkind. "Yes," I replied, my Chicago accent sharp against the wild air, betraying the nerves I fought to hide. I straightened, clutching my brooch, its familiar weight grounding me. He studied me for a moment, his gaze unreadable, then took my satchel without a word, his calloused hand brushing mine, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of something I couldn't name. He loaded my bag onto a weathered wagon, its wood splintered by years of Montana's wrath, and offered a hand to help me up. I hesitated, then took it, feeling the quiet strength in his grip as I settled beside him. The wagon creaked to life, pulling us away from Hollow Creek and into the open prairie, where the last rays of sunlight bled into a sea of swaying grass. We rode in near silence, the jingle of harnesses and the wind's mournful song filling the space between us. I stole glances at Caleb, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the horizon. Was he kind, or merely dutiful? Broken, or simply guarded? The scandal I'd left behind felt small against this vast, unforgiving land, where the plains seemed to whisper of trials yet to come. Montana wasn't just a place, it was a crucible, a Prairie Love Legend that would test my courage and reshape my heart. I shifted, my dress catching on the rough bench, and asked, "How far to the farm?" My voice sounded too loud, too fragile. "Few miles," he said, glancing at me briefly, his hazel eyes catching the fading light. "Gets dark quick out here." No more words, just the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves. I nodded, my fingers tracing the brooch, and let the silence settle, heavy as the gathering dusk. The farm emerged as the stars began to prick the sky, a sturdy log house with a tin roof, its windows glowing like embers in the night. A barn stood. Nearby, its wood silvered by time, and a small corral held a lone horse, its breath visible in the cooling air. The land around it was raw, scarred by wind and toil, yet beautiful in its defiance, a desert rose romance blooming against the odds. Caleb stopped the wagon, and I stepped down, my skirt snagging on a nail. "Your room's inside," he said, pointing to the house. "I sleep in the loft above the barn." His tone was flat, a wall I couldn't breach. I nodded, my heart sinking, and followed him inside, where the scent of cedar and smoke greeted me. On the mantel, a photograph caught my eye. A young woman, her kind eyes and gentle smile frozen in time, her presence a ghost in this lonely home. That night, I lay in a narrow bed, the quilt thick with the scent of lavender and something older, sadder. Moonlight spilled through the window, silvering the room, and I touched my brooch, whispering a prayer for strength. The wind howled across the plains, a restless spirit that seemed to carry Caleb's silence, louder than any words. That photograph, his late wife, I knew, watched me like a sentinel, her smile both a challenge and a warning. What secret did this farmer guard, and could a heart so shuttered ever open to a stranger like me? The Montana dawn broke fierce and golden, spilling light across the endless plains like a promise carved in fire. I woke in my narrow bed, the quilt heavy with lavender and loss, and traced the silver brooch pinned to my gray calico dress, now hung on a peg. The room was small, its wooden walls worn smooth by time, and the photograph of Caleb's late wife stared down from the mantel, her kind eyes both a comfort and a challenge. I'd come to Hollow Creek to escape Chicago's whispers, but this farm, with its silent farmer and ghostly memories, felt like a riddle wrapped in sagebrush. What secrets did Caleb Harrow guard, and could I find my place in a home still tethered to another woman's heart? I dressed quickly, tying my blue bonnet, and descended to the kitchen, where the scent of coffee lingered, bitter and strong. A tin mug sat on the table, steam curling like a ghost. But Caleb was gone, his absence as loud as the wind rattling the windows. The house was sturdy but sparse, its cedar floors scuffed by years of boots, and every corner held traces of her. Lydia. I'd learned from a faded Bible on the shelf. Her name was etched in delicate script, a relic of a life I could only guess at. I sipped the coffee, its warmth steadying my nerves, and stepped onto the porch, where the Montana landscape unfurled before me, a Prairie Love Legend of rolling hills and stubborn grass, scarred by wind and time. The farm was a world of relentless work, and I threw myself into it, learning its rhythms like a child learning to read. I swept dust that returned like an old friend, wrestled with a cantankerous stove, and tended a small garden where Lydia's marigolds fought to bloom in the dry soil. The sun climbed high, its heat a hammer against my back, and I paused to wipe sweat from my brow, my bonnet slipping. Across the field, Caleb worked alone, mending a fence with steady hands, his brown shirt dark with sweat, his black Stetson low against the glare. He moved with purpose, but his hazel eyes, when they met mine, held a guarded distance, a storm I couldn't cross. Days blurred into a quiet routine, our interactions brief and practical. "More firewood's needed," he'd say, or I'd ask, "Want the shirts mended?" We were like two rivers running parallel, close but never touching, bound by necessity rather than warmth. Yet I noticed small things, the way he left a bucket of water by the garden, saving me a trip to the well, the way he paused at the barn door, glancing back as if to check I was still there. Was it duty or something softer? I clung to these signs, fragile as the marigolds, and let them fuel my hope. One afternoon, while scrubbing linens in the wash-house, I found a small wooden box tucked behind a loose board. Its lid was carved with a simple flower, and inside lay a child's drawing, crude lines of a house, a man, and a woman, labeled Papa and Mama. My breath caught. Caleb had no children, or so his letter claimed. Whose hand had drawn this? I hid the box in my apron, my heart racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. That evening at supper, the silence between us was heavier than the stew I'd made. Caleb ate slowly, his eyes fixed on the table, and I gripped my brooch, the words burning on my tongue. "Caleb," I began, my voice trembling, "who lived here with you and Lydia?" He froze, his spoon mid-air, and for a moment his hazel eyes flickered with something raw, grief or guilt. "You'll learn soon enough," he said, his voice low, and rose, leaving his plate half full. I watched him stride to the barn, his silhouette swallowed by the dusk, a cowboy heart story etched in shadow. The photograph of Lydia seemed to watch me, her smile a silent plea to keep searching. As I cleared the table, the drawing's weight pressed against me, a secret that could break this fragile truce, or build something new. What truth was Caleb hiding, and would it draw us closer, or drive us apart? The Montana summer burned fierce, the sun a relentless forge hammering the plains into submission. I woke to its golden glare spilling through my bedroom window, the quilt on my narrow bed damp with the night's heat. The photograph of Lydia, Caleb's late wife, gazed down from the mantel, her kind eyes a silent question in this house of secrets. I touched the silver brooch pinned to my gray calico dress, its familiar weight a tether to my old life in Chicago, now as distant as the stars that had faded at dawn. The child's drawing I'd found in the wash-house, hidden in my apron pocket, weighed heavier than the brooch. Whose hand had drawn it, and why did Caleb keep it from me? I dressed, tying my blue bonnet against the sun, and stepped into the kitchen, where the scent of coffee lingered, sharp and bitter. Caleb was gone, as always, his tin mug left on the table like a breadcrumb of his presence. The farm was a world of endless toil, and I'd learned its language, the creak of the stove, the stubborn soil of Lydia's garden, the wind's restless hymn across the plains. But Caleb remained a cipher, his hazel eyes a locked gate I couldn't breach. I sipped the coffee, its warmth steadying my resolve, and headed to the garden, where marigolds clung to life, their golden petals a fragile defiance against the Montana heat. Mid-morning, as I hauled water from the well, a sudden gust swept across the farm, kicking up dust that stung my eyes. The sky churned, not with rain, but with a sandstorm's fury, its howl a chorus of wild spirits. I dropped the bucket, my bonnet whipping loose, and ran for the house, the wind clawing at my skirts. Inside, Caleb was already there, slamming shutters, his brown shirt streaked with dirt, his black Stetson tossed on a chair. "Stay here," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "It'll pass." I nodded, my pulse racing as the storm battered the walls, a moonlit western saga of nature's wrath that mirrored the tempest in my heart. We sat in the dim parlor, the oil lamp casting flickering shadows across Lydia's photograph. The silence between us was thick, broken only by the storm's roar. I clutched the drawing in my pocket, its edges worn from my restless fingers. "Caleb," I ventured, my voice trembling, "that drawing I found, who made it?" His jaw tightened, his hazel eyes darkening like the sky outside. "Not now, Eleanor," he said, but his voice cracked, a fissure in his armor. I pressed on, softer. "I'm your wife. Don't I deserve to know?" He looked at me then, raw and unguarded, and for a moment I saw not the stoic farmer, but a man drowning in grief. The storm passed as quickly as it came, leaving the prairie dusted with fine sand that sparkled under the returning sun. Caleb rose, avoiding my gaze, and headed to the barn. I followed, driven by a need I couldn't name, my boots crunching on the gritty earth. The barn was cool and shadowed, smelling of hay and leather, and there, in a corner behind a stack of feed sacks, I saw it, a small pallet, a tattered blanket, and a wooden horse, carved with care. A child's hiding place. My breath caught, and I turned to find Caleb watching me, his face pale. "Her name's Sarah," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "My daughter. Lydia's gone, but Sarah, she's all I got left." I stared, the drawing burning in my pocket. "Why hide?" "Huh?" I asked, my voice shaking with hurt and confusion. He looked away, his hands clenching. "She's scared. Been through too much. Didn't know if you'd stay." The words landed like stones, heavy with truth. I wanted to be angry, but his pain, raw as the Montana wind, stopped me. "I'm here now," I said, stepping closer, my hand brushing his arm. He flinched, but didn't pull away, and in that fleeting touch, I felt a spark, fragile as a marigold in drought. That night, as I lay in bed, the moonlight silvered the room, and Lydia's photograph seemed to soften, her eyes less a challenge, more a plea. The prairie outside was quiet, its vastness a mirror to the questions in my heart. Sarah was out there, hidden, a child I hadn't met, but already felt bound to. Caleb's secret had cracked open a door, but could I step through? And would love find a way to bloom in this wild, broken land? The Montana summer softened into early autumn, the plains trading their scorched golds for a gentler hue of amber and sage. I woke to the quiet of dawn, the air crisp through my bedroom window, carrying the faint sweetness of dew-kissed grass. The photograph of Lydia on the mantel seemed less a shadow now, her kind eyes a quiet encouragement, as I pinned my silver brooch to my gray calico dress. Sarah, Caleb's hidden daughter, was no longer a secret, but a presence as real as the marigolds in the garden, their petals curling against the coming chill. Yet she remained unseen, a ghost in her own home. And I wondered, could I reach a child who'd learned to hide, and would Caleb let me try? I descended to the kitchen, where the scent of coffee mingled with the cedar of the old house. Caleb's tin mug sat on the table, still warm, but he was gone, his absence a familiar ache. The farm was a relentless taskmaster, and I filled my days with its demands, stoking the stove, mending linens, tending Lydia's garden. But now, each chore carried a new purpose, to make this place a home for Sarah, wherever she was. The drawing, I'd found its crude lines of Papa and Mama rested in my pocket, a fragile bridge to a child I longed to know. One morning, as I swept the porch, a rustle came from the barn, soft as a whisper. I set the broom aside, my blue bonnet slipping, and crossed the yard, the grass crunching under my boots. The barn door creaked open, and there, in the dim light, stood a girl. Sarah, no more than 6, her dark blonde hair tangled, her hazel eyes, so like Caleb's, wide with fear. She clutched the carved wooden horse I'd seen in her hiding place, her patched dress too small, her bare feet dusty. "Don't tell Papa," she whispered, her voice trembling. And my heart broke for the child who'd learned to vanish. "I won't," I said softly, kneeling to her level, my brooch glinting in the sunlight. "I'm Eleanor, your friend." She studied me, wary, then darted behind a hay bale. I didn't follow, but left a biscuit from breakfast on the pallet. A small offering in this Prairie Love Legend. That evening at supper, I faced Caleb across the table, his brown shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his black Stetson resting on a chair. "I saw Sarah today," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. His spoon paused, his hazel eyes meeting mine, raw with guilt and something softer. Hope, perhaps. "She's scared," he said, his voice low, like gravel underfoot. "After Lydia died, she stopped talking much. Hid when folks came, didn't want to scare you off." The words spilled out, heavy with years of silence. I reached across the table, my hand brushing his, the first intentional touch between us. "I'm not leaving," I said. and his fingers lingered, warm and tentative, a spark in the gathering dusk. He nodded, his jaw tight, and I saw the man beneath the farmer, a father, wounded, but fighting. Later, by the fireplace, Caleb pulled a small leather pouch from his pocket, its edges worn. Inside was a locket, etched with a tiny flower, Lydia's initials faint but clear. "She'd want Sarah to have this," he said, handing it to me. "Maybe you can give it to her." I took it, its weight a promise, and our eyes held, a cowboy heart story unfolding in the fire's golden glow. The Montana night pressed against the windows, its vastness a mirror to the trust we were beginning to build. The next day, I left the locket by Sarah's pallet, wrapped in a scrap of blue ribbon from my bonnet. She didn't appear, but the biscuit was gone, a sign she was watching. As I tended the garden, Caleb joined me, his hands muddy from the fields, his hazel eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "You're good for her," he said, and the words landed like rain on parched earth. We worked side by side, the marigolds bright against the autumn chill, and I felt a shift, a door opening, however slightly, in this wild, wounded land. That night. I lay in bed, the locket's ribbon in my hand, the moonlight silvering the room. Lydia's photograph seemed to smile, a blessing from a woman I'd never meet. Sarah was the key to this family, but trust was a seed that needed time. Could I nurture it, and would Caleb's heart, scarred by loss, bloom alongside mine? The Montana autumn deepened, the plains awash in crimson and gold, as if the land itself were weaving a tapestry of change. I woke to a crisp dawn, the air sharp with the promise of frost, and touched the silver brooch pinned to my grey calico dress, now softened by weeks of wear. The photograph of Lydia on the mantel seemed to glow in the morning light, her kind eyes a quiet blessing for the path I was forging. Sarah, Caleb's daughter, was no longer a shadow but a spark in this house, her small steps echoing in the barn where she hid. The locket I'd left for her, wrapped in my bonnet's blue ribbon, was gone, a sign she was reaching back. Could I become more than a stranger to this child, and would Caleb choose to walk this road with me? I descended to the kitchen, where the scent of coffee curled like a warm breath. Caleb's tin mug sat on the table, but he was there, stirring. The stove, his brown shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his black Stetson resting on a peg. "Morning," he said, his hazel eyes catching mine, softer than the Montana dawn. I nodded, pouring coffee, and felt a shift, a warmth that hadn't been there before. The farm was still a taskmaster, but its rhythms were ours now. I tended Lydia's marigolds, their golden petals defiant against the chill, while Caleb mended fences, his broad shoulders a steady presence across the fields. One afternoon, as I hung linens to dry. A small figure emerged from the barn, Sarah clutching the locket, her dark blonde hair tied with my blue ribbon, her hazel eyes hesitant but curious. "Is this really mine?" she asked, her voice a whisper, the wooden horse tucked under her arm. I knelt, my brooch glinting, and smiled. "It was your mama's, but she'd want you to have it." Sarah's fingers traced the locket, and for the first time she didn't run. "Can you read to me?" she asked, and my heart swelled, a Prairie Love Legend unfolding in the autumn light. We sat on the porch, her small body close, and I read from a tattered book of fairy tales, her laughter a melody against the wind's mournful song. That evening, Caleb joined us for supper, his presence steady as the oak table. Sarah sat between us, the locket around her neck, her patched dress cleaner now. "She spoke today," I said, my voice soft, and Caleb's eyes met mine, a flicker of gratitude breaking through his guarded storm. "You're good for her, Eleanor," he said, his voice low, and the words landed like rain on parched earth. After Sarah slept, we stood by the fireplace, the flames casting a golden dance across the room. I didn't think I could do this again, Caleb confessed, his hazel eyes raw. After Lydia, I thought love was done for me. But you're changing that. I stepped closer, my hand finding his, the calluses warm against my skin. I came here to start over, I said, but I'm staying for you and Sarah. His fingers tightened around mine, and in that moment, the Montana night seemed to hold its breath, a cowboy heart story kindling in the fire's glow. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small silver ring, its edges worn but polished. It was my mother's, he said, sliding it onto my finger beside my brooch. I want this to be real. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. The ring, a vow heavier than the one we'd spoken in Hollow Creek. The next day, Sarah stayed closer, helping me in the garden, her small hands digging beside mine. Caleb watched from the corral, his Stetson low, a rare smile softening his weathered face. The marigolds bloomed bright, a testament to resilience, and I felt the farm shift, not just a place, but a home. Yet, as I tucked Sarah into a proper bed that night, her locket gleaming, a question lingered. Chicago was a shadow, but a letter from my sister Clara had arrived, offering a return to the city. Could I leave this fragile family? Or had Montana's wild heart claimed me for good? As I lay in bed, the moonlight silvering the room, I traced the ring on my finger. Lydia's photograph a silent witness. The prairie outside whispered of choices, its vastness a mirror to my soul. Sarah and Caleb were my future, but choosing them meant letting go of the past. Would I stay, and could our love grow strong enough to weather the storms ahead? Winter cloaked Montana in a shimmering veil of frost, the plains glittering under a sky so vast it seemed to cradle every hope I'd ever held. I woke in the log house, the air sharp with cedar and the bite of cold, my silver brooch catching the pale dawn light as I slipped into my gray calico dress, now softened by months of wear. The photograph of Lydia on the mantel glowed softly, her kind eyes no longer a shadow but a beacon, woven into the family we'd built. Sarah slept in the room beside mine, her locket and blue ribbon a testament to trust earned through quiet days. Caleb's ring on my finger, warm against my skin, was a vow that had taken root in this wild, unforgiving land. Had Montana's heart claimed me fully, and could our love withstand the tests of time? I descended to the kitchen, where the scent of coffee mingled with the warmth of the stove. Caleb stood there, his brown shirt rolled at the sleeves, his black Stetson resting on a peg, his hazel eyes catching mine with a tenderness that still felt new. "Coffee's hot," he said, a smile tugging at his weathered face. And I poured a mug, our fingers brushing, a ritual that sparked warmth against the winter chill. Sarah bounded in, her dark blonde hair tied with my blue ribbon, her new dress, sewn by my hands, swirling as she spun. "Can we skate today, Papa? Please?" she asked, clutching her wooden horse, and Caleb's laugh, deep and rare, filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. We trekked to the frozen creek beyond the barn, the snow crunching under our boots, the plains a silvered expanse under the morning sky. Sarah wobbled on skates Caleb had carved, her laughter echoing like a melody across the Montana vastness. I steadied her, my brooch glinting, while Caleb skated beside us, his Stetson low, his hazel eyes alight with a joy I'd once thought lost to him. The landscape, stark and beautiful, was no longer a foe but a partner, a prairie love legend that had tested us and forged us anew. Back at the house, we warmed by the fireplace, Sarah nestled between us, reading from her fairy tale book. "You're my mama now, right?" she asked, her hazel eyes searching mine, the locket gleaming at her throat. I glanced at Caleb, his nod a silent vow, and pulled her close. "Forever," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes, my heart full in this cowboy heart story. That evening, Caleb and I stood on the porch, the stars blazing above like a map of our journey. My sister Clara's letter, offering a return to Chicago, lay unanswered in my room, its words fading against the pull of this land. "You could still go," Caleb said, his voice low, his hand finding mine, warm and sure. "But I'd beg you to stay." I smiled, tracing his ring, its silver cool against my skin. "This is home," I said, and he pulled me into his arms, his warmth a shield against the winter wind. The plains stretched endless, their frost-kissed beauty a mirror to our resilience, a desert rose romance blooming in the harshest of soils. Reflecting on our path, I saw Montana as a crucible, not a breaker of spirits, but a revealer of truths. Love wasn't a sudden blaze, but a seed, nurtured through silences, storms, and small acts of courage. Like Caleb's carved skates, Sarah's locket, my choice to stay. Lydia's memory, once a weight, was now a light, guiding us to honor the past while building a future. Sarah was our heart, Caleb my anchor, and this farm, scarred but steadfast, our legacy. The humanistic message was clear. Even in the wildest lands, love could grow, stubborn as marigolds in drought, a testament to the human spirit's resilience. Eleanor's tale echoes the real mail-order brides of the 1880s, women who braved the frontier to forge families. Their stories, preserved in diaries and letters, live on in Western romance. Curious? Explore archives like the Montana Historical Society for more moonlit Western sagas. If this sunset frontier tale touched your soul, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more Prairie Love Legends. Share in the comments. Would you choose love in Montana's wild heart? Let's keep these desert rose romances alive.